Hey, Greg. It should be in the calendar notifications you got. And it's always the same link, by the way. Same link as last time. Same link for January too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, I don't see you yet. Okay. I see Reg. I don't see you yet.
So I actually had two links, and the one link I didn't connect with.
Okay.
The second one I did connect with.
Ray just says he had two links, so and the one didn't work. Okay. Maybe the one for January is a different link. Could be.
I think so. I think it is. Yeah.
Okay. Then we got to find the link now. And
I think I used the original link from the email.
The original link. So the January, when I set up the January stuff, it probably went to a different link.
Yeah.
The mysteries of Google Meet. Are you still there, Greg? Yeah. So we have to find. Let me see if I can find this quickly. It should be in the Google Calendar. So if you have a Google Calendar,
I don't have.
That's where it would be. Okay, at least that's where I sent it to. Let me see if I can find that. Okay. So I'm in the Google Calendar now. It doesn't give me the link. It just says, "Do you want to join?" Right?
I'll try and send you the original one. Hold on.
Can you try to send it to Greg?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, I just need his Greg. There it is. Okay.
Okay. He is here. He is here.
Oh, okay.
Are you in? Yeah, you're in, right?
Now they can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. We gotcha. Okay, now I have to close this somehow again. Okay. Very good. So we're missing Noah, right? And do we miss anybody else? Sorry about that.
I just have to. I'm gonna put you on background. I'm gonna have just two more patients. I have to just finish seeing, and it won't be long. I'm just gonna listen to you guys.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Life
Okay.
is what it was. I'm so sorry.
I'm glad you're keeping the population healthy.
I'll be back in 2 seconds. Hold on for a sec.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, so thank you for doing the homework. You all did. Oh, yeah, Jimmy is missing too. Still, Jimmy is not here yet.
I'm just gonna do here. Let's put it in here. Now, how do I put? I'm gonna just mute. I'll turn off my camera here.
Okay. So, yeah, thanks for doing the homework. You all did really well. Now, honestly, did you do this without looking at material, or did you work with material on the side? Okay.
I can tell you what I did. I did it just sitting down in one session without looking anything up. And there were some problems where it looked trickier, I wasn't sure, and I highlighted them. in yellow in the
Oh,
in
that's
it.
what the
And
yellow
then
highlights
some
were.
other ones I didn't even know what the correct answer was, and I highlighted them in a different color. And then I went back and I looked those up, and I think I would have maybe done 5 fewer correct if it
Mhm.
had been a real test. If I just walked in and done it.
Yeah, I mean, you all passed fairly well, right? Sort of in the 80s, the pass mark is 60. So you did really well, and it's okay when you do homework like this. It's fine to look at the material because that teaches you things too, right? You flip back and forth in the book, and the FAA book is really good, the glider flying handbook, and you see this and that, and then just read around the question as well, right? And there's usually explanations in there, so that all helps. Obviously, once you're in the exam, you can't look anything up anymore. You should also realize that you cannot take your phone into the exam for obvious reasons, and sometimes it helps if you have a calculator. So if you dig deep in drawers, you'll probably find an old calculator still from way back when phones didn't have calculators, and take that out. So a regular calculator is acceptable. Shouldn't be too fancy, right? The best is just the four basic calculations. And I'll also find out what they actually give you. I think they give you a package. Definitely the maps and stuff are in there, but you definitely need to work on maps to prepare yourself for that. And the typical questions will be, they either give you an airport and say you're 3,000 feet above this airport. In what airspace are you? Or they just give you coordinates. You have to find the coordinates, and then they say and you're at X feet altitude. So what airspace are you in? Or how far is this from whatever different coordinates? They won't be very sophisticated about this because it's just a gliding exam, and in their minds, gliders only fly locally, anyways, right? They get towed up, and after 5 minutes, they're back down. But and for in real life, I mean, everybody has, I don't know, I carry probably 5 GPSs in the cockpit nowadays with all the little gadgets that have GPS equipped, from watch to this to this to this. So nowadays, navigation isn't really an art anymore, anyways. And the other thing is in power, you set your heading, or you determine what your ground track would have to be, and then you calculate what is your heading based on, and your compass heading based on converting this into magnetic and taking the wind into account, and then you fly that heading. In gliding, we have sort of a rough direction, and then we don't just fly a straight line. We take advantage of all the lift, right? So and with that, we roughly, I mean, it's nice to have a moving map in your cockpit, which the better computers all have, or you have a PDA with separate on the side, right? And there's good software available for nothing, right? It's free, and all you have to do is hook this up properly, right? And the PDA has a GPS too. So this is really not in reality. Navigation is really not a problem anymore, right? Becomes a problem when you have a power failure and all goes dark, right? This happened to us once. That happened in Namibia, and it was late in the day. The sun was already low, and we were heading for home. And there's my tea. Thank you very much. Thank you. And after 7.5 hours in the air or so, the battery said, "This is it." And all of a sudden, everything went dark. All the screens went off and everything, right? And it was already fairly I mean, the sun was still up, but it was was close to the horizon. It was fairly dark then in the cockpit too, and it was actually pretty shocking. The visibility, we couldn't really see. Everything looked the same reddish area, anyways. So we couldn't really look down and say, "Oh, there's a river and there's this and there's a town." There were no rivers and towns. And for a while, this was quite unsettling. And fortunately, my brother he was in the back seat. He had a little navigation device that was based on a Kobo reader. And he fired that one up and had a GPS, and then we were going again, and then we managed to change the battery as well and boot all the computers back up. They didn't like this, that the battery just turned off, right? And then we were going again. But for a moment, you don't give much thought to navigation nowadays, but for a moment, it was pretty unsettling, to be honest. It certainly startled me. It would have been, without any help, it would have been difficult to find home because it's just one farm in the middle of nowhere, right? And it's not well marked, but of course, it's a special area. Okay. Well, I guess did Jimmy join us? No. So we're a small group today. What I want to do today is I want to revisit, first of all, a sample exam we did 2 weeks ago. Sorry for having to cancel, by the way, last week. And there were a few questions that were still left over. And then I would like to go over, there were certain questions in the current exam which you did that pretty much everybody got wrong. Well, there were some questions where a lot of people had trouble with, and we go to those. And then if you have any other questions, I didn't realize, Reg, that yellow highlighted mean you didn't really know the answer. Because some of them you answered right? You all got back from me. You all got the graded sheet back, right? So the incorrect ones are all marked in red now, with the correct answer beside it. Okay, so having said that. Going back to, we were 2 weeks ago, we worked on the sample exam number 1, and we kind of I think we ended up at about question 36 or so. And I'll share a screen now. Oh yeah, we wanted to record as well, so let's do that first. Okay, the screen recording, or the recording, is now on. Speaking of recordings, we have, so this is the 3rd recording we are doing here, and then Greg has one recording, I think, that has been turned into a YouTube yet. We can turn these recordings also into a YouTube, but yeah, I can also just send you, they're sitting in my OneDrive. I can send you a link to the OneDrive. I think I did. And the first recording was basically what we are recording now, where we're recording the main screen with you can see all the people. And when I present, then this also shows up. The second recording, I only recorded my presentation screen. And of course, that makes it bigger and easier to read. But, and you hear me talk, but what you miss is when I sort of give explanations with my hands, right? That doesn't come through. If you look at this, or if if you work through these recordings, just let me know what works better, right? We're not really doing much explaining with the hands, but if that's something you find valuable, then right now we are recording the main screen again, so there should be a little window with my smiling face on it beside the screen I'm sharing. So I'm going to share now one screen. So screen number 2. And what pops up should be the question 37 of, of this sample exam number 1. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep. Noah just sent an email. She's having a hard time getting on, I guess.
Oh,
We sent her a link, so
okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really sorry for that. I should maybe make the routine that I send out on Thursday afternoon. I send out an email with a link. I think it's better. I think you all got, when I set up the schedule for January. I mean, I don't know the mysteries of how Google works, but I think you all got an email, right, with that saying and the schedule, right? And if that link is now a different link because it was set up at a separate time, then of course that's probably what's tripping people up.
That's the link that I tried first today, is the one you most recently sent.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get through. And then I went back to the old one, which is the FDK GCFFOOD link. And that's the one that works.
Okay. Well, going forward, I hope I don't forget. I'll just send the actual link out just before we meet, so you have it, and you should be able to click on it. Or if you, okay, there we are. Hey, Noah.
Hi, sorry for the delay. I think I was going to an old Google Meet meeting email.
Yeah, that's fine. I set the schedule for January, and with that, it sent out a link to everyone. But that's the link for January.
Oh, okay. I see the mistake I made. Okay, got it.
So and it tripped up a number of people. You're not the only one.
Okay.
And what the link for all these meetings in December, they're all the same because I set them up all at the same time.
Okay, got
At
it.
least I hope so. Yeah. Anyways, what we just decided, I will send out the link every Thursday evening or afternoon, so you have the actual link and there's no questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. And we are, and thanks for doing the homework, Noah. Good stuff. You passed as well. Good. Everybody passed actually. So we could stop and send you all out there. Not really yet, but anyways, it's a good sign that things are working well. So I have just going back 2 weeks, we were on exam 1 and we kind of stopped at about, I think, question 36. Let me just pull this back up. So that was the one with the Mayday and the pan. The urgency signal is preceded by the word, and you all know this now. The word is, tell me. The word is pan. So urgency is pan, and an emergency is Mayday. So if you get low on fuel and you want to make this known, then you would call a pan. Or you have a passenger who is not feeling well and who should probably be met by some first responders when we are on the ground, this would be a PAN thing. Mayday is when you have an active emergency, engine on fire or whatever, right? Then you can declare a Mayday. There's more paperwork for a Mayday afterwards than for the PAN. In gliding, we usually, since we are not really talking to ATC all the time, we usually don't need those. But we had a Mayday call once, and I think I talked about this when we had a mid-air collision, and one of the pilots put out a Mayday call. He saw that, and but one thing the Mayday call does, it makes the whole frequency quiet. Nobody talks anymore. Just the Mayday traffic happens on the frequency then. So that was appropriate at the time, and because we needed to find the airplane that had crashed, and he could give a good description from the air, and we found the plane pretty quickly, and we got the first responders to the crash site. Okay, so question 37.
Could I just ask a question? Sorry. On
Yep.
when will you PAM and when will you use Mayday? What's it? It's like how urgent and whatever. How do you decide which one to use?
Well, if it is urgent but not an emergency, like if you see something that could become an emergency, for example, you're down to your last 20 minutes of fuel or so, if you're a power pilot, or you're getting pretty low. Well, if you're a glider, you're getting low, you look for an off-field landing field, right? There's no point in talking to anybody, right? You better make sure you make a good off-field landing. But if it's urgent, you have a passenger who is starting to get really sick or so, but it's not something where you have to immediately land now to fix that. Let's say you're passing by Toronto Airport, right? And the passenger has a heart attack. Then you may declare an emergency land at Pearson, so the guy can be treated right away. That would be an emergency. But if he just feels pretty sick or so, you can carry on to Kitchener. You put out a pan, have a very sick passenger. So please expedite my approach and everything, and I'll bring him in. And perhaps you want him met by some medical people on the ground right away.
So someone's having bad chest pain. You don't know if it's a heart attack or not. Is that and they're not feeling well? What would you call that?
Well, it can turn into an emergency if the guy all of a sudden becomes unresponsive, right? I mean, you as a doctor probably know best when this is a problem. Then it is an emergency, and then you want to land as quickly as possible. And but if it's just something where you feel you may have a problem, then it's just a matter of urgency. Which also means basically, hey, this could turn into an emergency anytime, so watch out, right? So they already will pay attention to you, and they won't give you the runaround on a long approach, so they'll bring you in. Depending on what it is, it could be that you have one cylinder running really hot on your engine, right, or something like this. It's mainly a power thing in a glider. What emergencies do we have? We get low and we need to land. But if you were in an area where you're in the middle of there is nobody else, right? Then it would be a good idea to tell people where you're landing, right? But in these cases, we have nowadays satellite navigators or satellite units that talk to satellites, and they sort of follow you around. So if you disappear, people can trace where you went, and when you're on the ground, you can actually send messages through the satellite system if you don't have cell phone coverage. There's a lot of other things you can do nowadays. So from a gliding perspective, except that you really witness an accident or so, and you need quiet on the frequency, there's really not much reason to commit for a Mayday call or a pan call. But it could be. It's also if you have to get down, if, for example, if you lose a canopy, right? We had somebody called a mayday when he lost the canopy. That was pretty cute. But it's not something that is an immediate emergency. You could say, you make a pan call and say, I got to land right away, clear the runway, and everybody in the circuit give me priority. I want to come down now because my canopy is open or something like that, right? That would be, but it's not an emergency in that case that it would kill you now, or it would cause a serious accident if it's not looked after right away.
So if my wife wants me home really quickly and she'll kill me if I don't get home, it's not a mayday.
Well, yeah, it depends how serious she is, right? Okay, so if you have a real problem, so basically the difference is emergency versus urgency. For glider pilots, not all that relevant, but for power pilots, yes. Okay, so now we have a little navigation thing here. Remember the conversion from true to magnetic. Remember the TV makes dumb cadets thing. Okay, so here they give us a track 343 true, a heading of 353 true, and a deviation. Do we remember what a deviation is? That's
Deviation's the error of the compass in that aircraft.
That's right. That's the compass in this particular aircraft. And there's a deviation table near the compass in the airplane. And then there's a variation. And do you all know what the variation is? Yes, I see nodding. Yeah, variation is basically the difference between true north and the magnetic north. And in our area, it's west. And in this here, we have an easterly variation. So the question is, is there a plus or a minus in front of both of those, right? When we go from true to magnetic. So
I think my instructor said that east is least and west is best.
that's right. West is best, east is least. That means there's a minus in front of those when it's east. In our area where we fly, we have typically 10 degrees west. So that's sort of the average. Okay, so now let's look at the question, the magnetic heading. First, a quick question, so that the track is different from the heading. How can this be?
Would that be wind correction?
Yeah, there is a wind that's drifting him a little bit. That's the difference. Without the wind, the heading, because it's both in true, right? The heading would be the same as the track, but there's wind. Now in the possible answers, the track really, if you think about it, doesn't figure in at all. It's just there to confuse you. Sneaky questions, so to speak. So it's basically the question is, the magnetic heading will be what? And what you do is you take the true heading and you convert it into magnetic. So we have 353 true. We start with the variation. We take the variation off. Remember, from true variation, the V, TV, and then later the deviation, the DUM comes on. Okay, so 353 minus 8 is 345. And minus 3 is another minus here, so it's a 342. Okay, did I get this wrong?
Is it because it's a magnetic heading? Do you have to add?
Good point. It's okay. Good point. It's a sneaky thing. Okay, the magnetic heading, it says here in my little thing that pops up, watch out, magnetic heading is not compass heading. So with and the question is what is the magnetic heading, not the compass heading? So you got to be careful. I got just hung up on that one. So if you're not doing compass heading, the deviation does not go in there. We're just stuck at the magnetic, which is basically the true adjusted for the variation. So we are at 345. So it's 353 minus the 8 here. 345 is the right answer. So that's something there's a few questions also in the list of questions I send out to you as homework. There is some of those awarded, and some of you tripped right into it, right? Worded in a way you have to read the question carefully and also the answers that are being offered carefully. Okay. Okay, so the word, well, the right answer here is what word means okay. We talked about this. Roger is not really what you say nowadays. That's the right answer here. But what do you really say if ATC talks to you and you want to confirm the receipt of the message and basically saying, yes, I received it and understood it, you confirm this with your registration, the last 3 letters of your registration. So Delta, X-ray, X-ray, or whatever you're flying. Okay, and what do the other words mean in radio talk? Confirmed really doesn't really exist there. Affirmative means yes. This is basically the radio talk word for yes. And acknowledge doesn't really exist either. You acknowledge with your registration. Okay. So this is an interesting one. 12 o'clock midday and 12 o'clock midnight are expressed as in, and of course we are talking, when we are talking on the radio times in aviation, we are talking UTC. Do we all know what UTC is? That's universal time. And this is the old Greenwich Mean Time. And in where we are in Ontario in summer, we are 4 hours off UTC. So UTC is 4 hours ahead of us because it is the time where the Greenwich meridian, the prime meridian, goes through London, right? And if you're ever in London, England, go out and take the time to go out to the Greenwich if you have some time and look at this. It's really interesting. This is where the time, basically, the British Empire was so big, right? They had one point where they said, okay, this is the right time for all the ships that were running around. And later it became even more important that everything was running on one time when the trains started running. Before they had the times coordinated in North America, there were train accidents because somebody said, yeah, I'm letting the train go at 10 o'clock. And the other guy said, I'll let mine go at 11 o'clock. But the clocks were not synchronized. So they ran into each other somewhere in between.
I just heard this story. I'm in London right now, and I did the hop on, hop off tour, and they go into a whole spiel about the Meridian line in Greenwich and how you should go visit.
Yeah, that's great. And if have you been out in Greenwich there, or if you?
I haven't been there yet, but I'm here a few more days, so maybe I'll make the journey there.
Yeah, you can. The prime meridian is marked there, and the Greenwich is an observatory because they pointed up. They basically had to figure out when was the sun at the highest, right? And then when the sun was at the highest, they fired a cannon, so everybody in London knew, okay, now it's noon. And the prime meridian is actually marked in that observatory, so you can actually walk directly on the prime meridian. It's good. I did this. I had fun. And it's also interesting if you think about the whole concept of time, right?
Okay, I'll make it out there and
Okay.
report back.
Yeah, let us know how it was. Okay, so when we talk in aviation, we talk UTC. So obviously there's no 12 a.m., 12 p.m. and that kind of stuff, right? We're talking time in UTC is always 4 digits, right? So it's noon is 1200. If you want, you can put a colon in between, but it's 1200. And the question is, what is midnight? And a lot of people get this wrong. And there is no such thing in UTC or in the 24-hour clock as 2400. There is 23:59:59, but when it flips 1 second further, it's not 2400. It is 0000. It starts with the next day starts right there, and it starts with 0 hours. So the correct answer in this one is 1200 for noon and 000 for midnight. And the funny thing is, I'm starting to fly Condor again, simulator and competitions, and somebody announced, okay, our competition will be starting in such and such a time, and they did this all in UTC. And 7 o'clock right now in winter, 7 o'clock here is midnight UTC. And he basically wrote 1200 p.m., which is not a UTC time, right? And he got the date wrong too, right? Because the date is already the next day, right? So the way he wrote up the timing for the competition, it was already yesterday. Okay. So to sum this up, UTC times, we always talk in UTC times in aviation, and this is a 4-digit, there's 24 hour, there's no AM or PM, 24 hour. And the important thing is midnight is not 2400, it's 0. Okay. Then 40. Does an airship have priority over or right away over a glider? No. Does a tow plane have priority over a glider right away? No. And does a power-driven fixed-wing airplane have priority over a helicopter and the right away? Also no. So first of all, this sounds all complicated, but you need to know a glider has the right of way over everything but a balloon, because a balloon can absolutely not evade or cannot make way, right? So a glider has the right of way over everything else but a balloon. Power planes, it doesn't matter, is it a helicopter or not, are at the same level. However, power planes have to give way to airships or so, and balloons and gliders. But as far as we're concerned, the easy way is the glider always has priority, except it's a balloon. That's how you can remember it. Okay, so now we're getting more into the navigation. If you get something like this where there is wind and whatever, right? First of all, you got to make sure you see, is it true or is it magnetic? Sometimes they give you the wind magnetic. One thing to know is, and I'm sure when you looked at the weather decoding sheet, that the winds that for all the forecasts, be it the area forecast, the terminal forecast, or the METAR, which is not a forecast, which is a snapshot of what it is, the winds are always given in true, not in magnetic, which is strange because the the runway headings are in magnetic, right? So not sure why that is. Makes no sense to me, but that's how it is. And it's in that sheet, the coding sheet for the weather. Okay. So let's say we have a track of 260 true. Variation is 10 west, so must be Ontario. Deviation 8 east. We have a true airspeed of 120 knots, and we have wind at 090 at 30 knots. Wind is true, and the given track is true, which is good. So we don't have to make any adjustments. Now, if you picture this, and it's good if you can just sort of draw this out on a piece of paper a little bit. So the airplane is going basically west, right? A little off west. The wind is coming from the east. And that's the important thing. When an airplane flies 260 or 270, it's going west. If the wind is 270, it's coming from the west. So it's actually blowing to the east. And that's important not to mix this up. So what we have here is basically a tailwind situation. We have an strong easterly wind, and the airplane is flying more or less to the west. So, but the angles don't 100% line up, because 90 degrees there, it's about 10 degrees off, right? And so the questions down there, what's the resultant ground speed and compass heading to maintain track? Okay, let's look at the ground speed first. So we are flying true airspeed 120 knots. Do we know the difference between true airspeed and indicated airspeed, by the way? You all look puzzled. So the indicated airspeed is what your airspeed indicator shows. The true airspeed is the indicated airspeed adjusted for the height. When you fly high, the air pressure gets lower and lower and lower. So the true airspeed will get faster and faster and faster. So in other words, if you indicated airspeed at 10,000 feet is 100 knots, your true airspeed is probably 120 knots. So that's the speed you're actually moving through the air. And then your ground speed is that true airspeed adjusted for wind. And in this case, we have true airspeed, and we have the wind blowing more or less at our back at 30 knots. So what will the resulting ground speed be? It must be pretty close to 150 knots, but a little less because we have a little angle misadjustment at 10 degrees off. Okay, so 91 knots is out. 152 knots is also out. It cannot be more than 150 knots. So it's out. So we just have those two where this would work. And now let's, the other thing is, if you draw it out, you can see that the wind is slightly from the right. So from the tail, but from the right. So 5 o'clock-ish. No, sorry, wrong. It's slightly from the left. 7 o'clock-ish. Which means that the correction, if he wants to maintain this track, he has to correct a little to the left, which means he will be a slightly lower number. Okay, so let's convert the true track here into magnetic, because the question is asking for magnetic. And so we have we go from true first variation, right? 10 west, so it's then 250 magnetic, and then 8 east. No, sorry, it's west is best. it's 270 magnetic, and then 8 east. We take 8 off again, so it's 262 magnetic. And now he has to fly a little further to the left because the wind's a little to the left to hit into this. So he has to fly something like 264 or something like that. Okay, let's see. And 262. 259 is out. 257 is also out. It's 250. Before we said, when we looked at the speeds, it's got to be either one of the two, right? So B is the right answer. A little further to the left, 262, and
Excuse me, Jorg.
yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
Isn't 259 a little further to the left?
Yeah, 259 is a little further to the left. Yeah, so that's
262 is a little further to the right from the original heading of 260.
No, we are at 262 magnetic, so it's the same, right? A little further to the left is 259, so that's the right answer. So it's 149, very close to 150. And so you, without, the other way to calculate this is if you draw it out with vectors. But quite often you can just work this, at least the more simpler things, you can work this with just with logic. Simply going, what should the speed be and where do we need to be? And the 259 gives you 3 degrees, right? And 3 degrees sounds like a good, about the right adjustment for that small angle we have here. But you should still draw it on paper. Then you don't make these mistakes that you go the wrong way, like I just did in these things. Okay. And so there's more of those. I don't think you will get all that much of those. So we'll yeah, this one you really need to draw out. I have a drawing for this. I can show you how to draw these out. Just bear with me here for a moment. Okay, you see that. And I think that's basically what it is. Let's just see if that's the one. So where's my exam? Here. Okay, track 115 knots. I think that's that one. No, but it's still a good example. So it's not quite the right thing, but this basically shows you how you can draw this out. So you have a track, you draw this. In this case, I think it's 60 true. In our question, it was 40 true, so it's a little different. Then you draw the wind arrow in its direction and in its length. And you can say, you have to sort of work with the scale. You can say, well, 10 knots is a centimeter, like 10 millimeters or something like that. So to fit it on the piece of paper, right? And then you basically, once you're here, you can go back and find the point where this point and this point joins the track again. So your plane, and it gives you, first of all, the angle you need to correct here, the wind correction angle. And the length of this arrow also is representative of the true airspeed you have with the wind applied. No, this is the true airspeed, and then your ground speed will be this orange arrow. Does that make sense? Everybody is saying, "Oh boy." We'll
No,
go.
no, no, no.
Pardon?
Vector arithmetic is not that hard.
No,
It's
no.
fine.
If you know it, right, then it's easy, right? But this way you can just to go a little through here. So yeah, since vector arithmetic came up, there's basically a vector is a quantity with a direction, right? And you can represent it, draw it like an arrow. And so if you have two vectors, you can add them, and the vector C, vector A plus vector B is vector C, right? So that's the geometry there. And the practical application there is, let's say you have an airspeed of 100 knots, a heading of 90 degrees, and wind at 45 degrees at 28 knots. So you put your heading on 90 degrees, right? Then you put your wind on, like here, and that means so right away you see you're having a slight headwind component, right? The wind is 45 degrees, so again it blows from 45 degrees. So that basically makes you fly with that wind in this direction. But you don't want to fly in this direction. You want to really be on that heading still. That means you have to correct a little bit. And so this is the point where you would fly to. And then you correct this whole thing. You can put on the wind here. And it doesn't matter which way you put the vectors on. It comes up to the same. So if you put the wind on first and you're heading through the air, and your airspeed second, you get to the same point. And then this shows you, so you have the resulting ground speed and track, and then you can move. Oh, I lost you. Okay, so the lesson here is if it doesn't work the one way, it works the other way. So if we go back here, first we had our initial track and speed, and we put the vector here, and we ended up with this point, and this was the resulting ground speed. You can also start out with the wind vector and then put your flying on, you get to the same point, right? And the same resulting ground speed again. Okay, so that's basically the basics of vector geometry. I don't want to take it any further here, but there's more to come if you ever need to revisit this again. Now in power pilots have to do a lot with this kind of stuff. In gliding, not so much. There was one question. Yeah, that's an interesting question here. Yeah, and we have a diagram for that too, right? And this is important for gliding because what that means, we have a given track of 60, true airspeed of 110 knots. We have the wind from 150, and if you look at this, the wind is basically at 90 degrees, so that it's at right angles to your track. And we have this sometimes in gliding, we have a crosswind, we have a wind from the side. Now the question is a wind from the side, is it going to help us or is it going to hinder us? And it is actually hindering us. And gotta go back to this guy. Yeah, this is exactly this case. So we have this track here, and the wind this is a right angle here. This is basically a total crosswind. And what it then requires us is to have to compensate into the wind, to correct into the wind. And that means that our resulting ground speed, if you stay on this track, is actually it was 110 true airspeed, is now a little lower. So for the gliding purposes, it means even if you have not a headwind, just a crosswind, it still works like a little bit of a headwind. So it hinders you, it reduces the range you can fly, and hinders you basically from getting where you want to go. So crosswind is not benign. It is still has, because you have to correct against it, you have to correct into the wind, and it reduces basically your glide angle and all these good things. You need to come back. So don't underestimate a strong crosswind. That's basically what this says. Okay. Put this away again, and I think everything else is, yeah, now we're getting in. The turn and slip indicator, that could be a question that comes up. Do we all know what a turn and slip indicator is? It's an instrument that power planes have, where they have a needle that's a gyro needle. And when you turn, that needle points into the turn, and the slip indicator, that's the turn indicator, and the slip indicator is a ball that sort of goes in a liquid back and forth. And the ball is the same as we have, or is the equivalent of the yaw string. And and the question is, what does it show? So the turn needle of the turn and slip indicator shows that the rate, definitely the rate of turn, but not the radius. It doesn't show the amount of bank. That would be your artificial horizon or attitude indicator, as we say now. It shows the direction of the turn and the rate of turn. So this would be the right answer here. And that's something that could come up also in a gliding exam. What does this show, right? And you can look this up. Basically, the turn and slip indicators in the FAA, or also in the PowerPoint from Mark McDermott. And so you know what it looks like. But the needle shows you the turn, the direction of the turn, and the rate of the turn. And the ball basically shows you, just like the yaw string, if you're yawing or slipping or skidding. So slipping and skidding is another term for yawing, basically. Okay. And so everything else is PowerPoint questions here. So we can close this now. And we can go to our current exam, the one you did as the homework. Okay, so you all did well. It's really good. Thank you. I just want to highlight a few of the questions that were a lot of people got wrong. And I have to go to my notes for this. Oh, yeah.
I thought for a second I did the wrong exam and you're showing the other thing there.
No, that was actually what we did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel better now.
Yeah, okay. So question 29, the blocked pitot. And most of you stumbled over that one. Okay, can you see that? Yep. Maybe we can make it a little bigger. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is question 29. And it reads, what would the effect of an airspeed indicator during a climb? What would be the effect on an airspeed indicator during a climb if the pitot line were completely blocked? And most people selected answer number 1, the airspeed indicator would cease functioning, which for all practical purposes is true. But the right answer is number 4, the airspeed indicator would behave like an altimeter. And why does it do that? Do we all know how an airspeed indicator is hooked up? It's hooked up to the pitot. The pitot is the air pressure that's basically through the airspeed, the ram air pressure. The air, you fly through the air, and that additional pressure will be picked up by the pitot. And it's a very small, and then it's also hooked up to the static pressure because it compares the pitot pressure with the, or dynamic pressure, it's also called, with the static pressure. And the difference is very small. For example, the difference at about 60 knots is only something like 6 millibar. 6 millibar, the atmospheric pressure, like where we are on the ground at sea level, is 1,000 millibars. Did I say bar? It's 6 millibar. So here we are having 6 millibar versus 1,000 millibar. So this is a tiny fraction of the atmospheric pressure. That's why you should never ever blow into a pitot tube, because small pressures can already ruin the airspeed indicators. And so what happens when the line is completely blocked? There is still air behind that blockage, and they cannot go anywhere, right? And when the airplane is initially on your ground run, nothing happens. The airspeed indicator doesn't move at all. But then when you lift off, what happens? The static pressure is decreasing. And that will then make, it says it functions like an altimeter. It's true that the indicator goes up, but it's of course not a useful altimeter because the scales, everything's wrong. What it does is it gives you an erroneous speed indication. It makes you believe, initially you say, oops, there's something wrong with my airspeed indicator, but then you lift off, you say, oh, now it seems to be working. It's not working. It gives you a totally wrong, it points to something, but it has nothing to do with your airspeed. And what it does is, if the difference, so you go up and the static air pressure is going down, 1,000 feet, if you go up 1,000 feet, you're already down about 30 millibars. So you can imagine what, with 6 millibars is 60 knots, right? So at 1,000 feet, or if you tow a little higher, your airspeed will pretty soon get to red line. And you go, oh my God, I'm going at red line. How can this be, right? The important thing to take away if this happens is your airspeed indicator is useless. Don't even look at it, right? So it's not functioning as an airspeed indicator anymore. Yes, technically it's now working like an altimeter. But the worst mistake you can make is look at your airspeed indicator and believe it will show you anything that makes sense. And as to some of you, I sent out a link about a video, a Mentour pilot video that shows how 100 people died in an airliner for exactly that reason. Because the pilots started believing, or the captain actually, his pitot was the one that was blocked. started believing the airspeed indication and stalled the airplane because it was too high. So he slowed down, slowed down, slowed down until the thing stalled and the whole thing crashed. So there's a lot more to it than what the right answer would suggest. Well, it will function like an altimeter. Everybody sees me, oh, okay. No, it's not okay. Do not even look at it. It's very dangerous because, I mean, obviously, glider pilots know better than to stall the airplane just because the airspeed shows red line. I mean, at some point, thinking has to set in and saying, well, my nose is way up. Obviously, I cannot go red line, right? But still, if you try to fix that, you will eventually stall. And if your airspeed indicator when you take off is not working, and then all of a sudden starts coming up, do not believe it. It's not working. This is when the pitot is plugged. Now, it's rare that the pitot is so plugged that it is completely sealed off. Let's say you have a wasp stuck in there or so, it will not completely seal it. So you will see a little bit. It will be useless still as an airspeed indicator, but it will probably not show you a red line when you're at 1,000 feet or something like this, because the air is still leaking out. But yeah, so this is one of those questions where you what question was that again? It was 30, I think. No, 29. Where the question is really, it doesn't show you what this really means. It says it's working like an altimeter, but that's not really what it is. It is totally unusable. So for practical purposes, number one would be completely the correct answer. But in this case, number four is so remember this, because this question sometimes come up. For exam purposes, the right answer is the airspeed indicator behaves like an altimeter. But it's a useless answer.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The airspeed indicator and the gliders, they're manual. They're not electronically controlled at all, and they're connected to the static port. Wouldn't the static port allow the air in the pitot tube to be equalized to the environment? Wouldn't it release the pressure, or is it two totally separate systems? Like in the Mentor aircraft, it was an electronic instrument where the pitot tube is totally separate and it feeds its information into the computer, and the static port is totally separate and it feeds it into a computer electronically. So the two systems are totally separate, but we use a manual system where the static port is connected with the airspeed indicator. And my question is wouldn't that, even if the pitot tube was totally sealed, wouldn't that allow the pressure to be bled off?
The answer is no, because there is a membrane between, there's basically two chambers, right? There is the static pressure in there. The other one, there's the pitot pressure in there. And there's a membrane in between, and the pitot pressure will actually deform this membrane, and that's what your airspeed indicator will pick up.
Okay.
So there's
that's what I was unsure about, if they were totally separated by something, which is the membrane, or whether they act.
Yeah, they're totally separated. Yeah, it's a good point, but it's right. It's not an electric system. It's just a mechanical system. But in this case, the membranes are sealed, so the pitot pressure or pitot air cannot leak into the static.
I believe in the FAA book, gliding book, it shows that how it's hooked up and how it affects the needle and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's right. Let's just Yeah, there's instruments. Let's just flip through. So when you read up on so first of all, you see the um, the uh, the lineup. There's a pitot tube usually in front, but it could also be at the tail, right? And the statics are sort of somewhere along the fuselage. The pitot tube picks up the pitot pressure. And here is what it says. For example, 60 knots correspond to 6 millibar of pressure from the pitot. So this is static plus 6 millibar. That's how, again, how sensitive it is. And okay, so this is what the instrument looks like. So the pitot pressure goes in here, static pressure goes in there, and there is the diaphragm, and that actually moves your needle, your airspeed needle, and it responds to very, very small differential pressures because the needle starts moving at about 15 or 20, 15 knots or so, and so the pressure is sort of in the area of maybe 1 to 2 millibars, right? The difference when it starts moving. Okay. So it says here a capsule with elastic properties that is airtight. So it's sealed, right? Like a balloon. It expands as the pressure inside it increases above the pressure outside. That's exactly what it is. And it shows all the other instruments as well. So if you look at this, certainly interesting. There's this is they call it also the ram air pressure. So ram air pressure, pitot pressure, and dynamic pressure is all the same stuff. There's the different words for the same thing. And this shows it nicely because it has different colors, right? So it shows where it's pressing against. And it also says here, no, 60 knots. Okay. By the way, since I opened this, there was also a question from, I think it was from you, Ray. What is the center of pressure? There was also a question in there. And you said, well, I don't know what that is. Never heard of it. There is a nice picture right here. I'll make this a little bigger. So the center of lift, this is where all the lift forces apply to the, basically are concentrated on the airplane, is also called the center of pressure. And the center of gravity, of course, the forces here point down. These are the forces that point up. And the center of pressure or center of lift always has to be behind the center of gravity, so the nose wants to go down. And the tail, the horizontal stabilizer, and the elevator, they basically prevent the nose from going down, so they have a negative angle of attack, and they keep the thing in the balance. So they provide a small downwards pressure that's variable depending on what you do on the stick. And this is basically the stability, provides the stability of your airplane. When the center of gravity moves backwards into close to the center of lift or center of pressure, then this is when you don't have enough lead in the front, or a light pilot gets into the front seat and there's nobody in the back seat. Then you get into a situation where the stability is not there anymore, right? And this is not a good, becomes very difficult to fly, and is very, very dangerous. We had this this year, the past season, when a student took off on a solo flight in the junior and had the tail dolly still on. So the guy was pretty light, And the tail dolly and the whole glider is not a big glider, the Junior, right? And these tail dollies, I mean, they're pretty chunky pieces of equipment, right? So that the danger there was, and I mean, we didn't know that this might have moved the center of gravity behind the center of pressure, right? Fortunately, we got him down alive. But so I got on the radio and I told him, keep at least 80 as a speed. Do not let the speed bleed off below 80, because 80 gives him enough authority with the elevator to keep the nose down. If you let the speed bleed off, what will happen is at some point the tail will go down because it's heavier, and there's nothing you can do anymore. It'll just keep going down, and then you go into a spin, a so-called flat spin, which is not recoverable. So fortunately, we got him down. So this is center of pressure, center of gravity, how they play together, right? Okay, does it
So
answer?
is the center of pressure then the same as center of lift?
Yes. Yeah.
They're exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Mhm. Yeah. Okay, and there's other questions. Another question many people stumbled over was what happens in a stall, and what happens in a stall. First of all, as the angle of attack increases, the center of lift, the center of pressure, is actually moving forward over the airfoil a little bit. But then when we stall, all the lift collapses that is above the airfoil, and that means it moves back again. So in the stall, it moves back. But before the stall, as the angle of attack increases, it actually moves forward. Let me just see if we find this. Okay. If we can find this. There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's nice pictures to it too. So this is how an airfoil stalls, right? This is the angle of attack here. Angle of attack by definition is the angle between the chord. The chord is the line between the leading edge and the trailing edge and the airflow. So this is the angle of attack. And this is the various spins we can have. No, I guess we must be. It's somewhere in the book, but it's. Can't find it on the quick right now. And the other thing is the lift is always, by definition, there was also a question, the lift is always perpendicular to the airflow. So when air blows at something, the forces that are created at this object can be split into drag and lift. So lift is perpendicular to the airflow, and the drag is with the airflow. Same direction. Okay.
That center of pressure is actually in the PowerPoint presentation where it shows how it moves forward.
Excuse
Okay.
me, Jörg.
Yeah.
You said that the drag is in the same direction as the flow of air. Should drag So drag is opposed to the direction of the flight of the aircraft, but with the air that opposes the aircraft. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the drag is opposed to the direction of the flight of the airplane, but it is therefore, so the drag force is opposed to that, so it's in the same direction as the airflow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you said it's in the PowerPoint, Doug?
Yeah, I believe it's 3742, the slide number.
Slide number. Okay, I have the PowerPoint here. Okay, so 37. That's a good 374. You must be in a different PowerPoint than I am.
Actually, it says page 59, I think, on the index.
In the PowerPoint of Mark McDermott.
Yeah. I think so. Ground school course.
Yeah.
Page 59.
Okay, there we go. Yep, this is a pretty good page. So so what happens is if your angle of attack, if your angle of attack is negative, you have sort of lift over there, right? It's actually pushing you down. If your angle of attack is positive, then you have the lift here, and if it's more and more positive, the lift sort of wanders forward to the nose. But then when you stall, all this lift on the top of the wing disappears because now you're stalled and the air just blows by, just burbles back here. So then the center of lift sort of and center of pressure wanders back roughly to the middle of the wing. That's basically what it means. So the answer to these questions is if the question is what happens if the angle of attack increases, the center of pressure wanders forward. What happens if the wing stalls? The pressure of center wanders back, pretty much again back to where it was before, so into the center of the wing, because all this stuff disappears. Okay, what does this show us? Yeah, so it shows the center of pressure here, moving forward with the increased angle of attack. And yeah. Okay, so coming back to our question again. So we were stuck on the altimeter, on the airspeed indicator question there. Sorry, that's so number 4, and I think most of you said number 1, which is, from me, is the right answer because it's useless. So don't use it, right? Then the question 30 also had a lot of questions here. So if a pilot does not apply forward or backward pressure to control the stick to keep it a constant flying attitude, the aircraft is said to be in what? And most people said in equilibrium, but it is actually in longitudinal trim. That means the trim is set right. So when you fly along, equilibrium means you're flying along at a steady speed, pretty straight at 1G, everything is in equilibrium. But if you're mistrimmed, let's say you can still have the trim too far forward, and you're just holding back the stick. So you have a stick force. You can still fly in equilibrium. It's just if you let the stick go, then the stick will go forward. Trim is basically to take the forces that want to move the stick somewhere else out. So if you fly at 60 and you pull the trim lever to the point where the stick does not want to move anywhere else, then you're in trim. And you should be. I mean, you should not be mistrimmed, because then when you don't pay attention, you have to pay constant attention to maintain the speed. If you're in the trim, the plane will fly that speed on its own. Now you have to retrim when you go into a turn, when you start throttling, because in the throttle, with a higher G on a 45-degree angle, you have about 1.4 G. And that will try to pull the nose down. So you have to actually bring the stick back a little further and trim back. And then when you come out of the turn, the nose will want to go up, avoid that, and then put the trim to normal flying, straight flying again. Any questions to that? So in this case, the right answer is longitudinal trim. Equilibrium is when the plane flies unaccelerated, as they say, so it's flying at a steady speed at 1 G. How can you fly with more than 1 G? You're doing something like this. You're basically pulling up. Then you get more than, or you're flying a turn, then you're also more than 1 G. Okay. What else? What other questions? Longitudinal trim, yeah. Oh yeah, question 33, different airspeeds. Okay, so how many airspeeds are there? So the question here is the level flight in level flight, I guess that means indicated stalling speed of an aircraft increases with altitude, decreases with altitude, does not change with altitude, is higher when flying upwind, I guess they mean. And the right answer here is the key word here is indicated speed, right? And here we're coming to how many speeds are there. There's indicated airspeed. That's what you read of your altimeter. Then there's true airspeed. That's the speed you're actually moving through the air with. And but what you're reading of your altimeter is the indicated airspeed. And the nice thing about this is that all the aerodynamic loads, what happens at higher altitude is the air gets thinner, right? So all the aerodynamic loads get weaker. And the same also applies to the pitot pressure. So this all goes together. So your stall speed, your turn speed, and all these speeds indicated are independent of how high you are, within reason, right? Let's say up to 20,000 feet or so. The only thing that goes up is your true airspeed. So if you fly at 15,000 feet or so, and it also depends on how, it's not just the pressure altitude, it's also the density altitude. We come to that later, what that means. If you fly in low density altitude, then you can fly indicated airspeed 100. And in real life, you're moving at 120 true airspeed. But when you're stalling the airplane, in terms of indicated airspeed, it is still the same as stalling when you're low down. It's no difference. The only difference, and this goes for maneuvering speed and all these other speeds as well, except for one speed, and this is who knows?
The danger speed with a red zone there.
VNE.
It is the danger speed is called the VNE. The V stands for speed, and NE, never exceed. So that's the speed to never exceed. It's the red line. It's a red line. If you get close to the red line or fly above the red line, what happens is you will encounter flutter. And so basically the ailerons will start fluttering. And this can very quickly will actually basically break the whole airplane apart. The wings will then start fluttering and will break it apart. And that flutter is not induced by aerodynamic forces. It is induced by the speed with which the molecules, the air molecules, go over the wing. And therefore, it's a true airspeed thing. That means, in other words, when you look at indicated airspeed, the higher you go, the further your red line comes down on your airspeed indicator. And if you look really closely in the more recent airplanes we have, like in the DG and also in X-ray and Yankee Juliet, there is a little table near the airspeed indicator that says at this altitude your VNE is this speed, at this altitude your VNE is this speed, and so on. That's basically telling you, and I think up to 6,000 feet you're fine, you can fly right up to the red line, but it's telling you at certain speeds or at certain altitudes the VNE is quite a bit lower. And again, it depends on not just on the pressure altitude, it also depends on the density altitude, which you cannot read. The density altitude you cannot read off your altimeter. So you have to be careful, because when it's really hot, there can be quite a difference between your pressure altitude and your density altitude. So we had, I've had a case, I've told this many times, maybe I told it already here, where we were flying in a two-seater at 15,000 feet, and we had to get under the airspace, and we put the nose down a little bit. It was an Arcus, and they really run, right? And I was in the back seat, and we were flying about 200 indicated airspeed, 200, basically 110 knots, 200 kilometers an hour, a little over 210. And the VNE on the Arcos is 280 kilometers an hour, so quite a ways away from VNE. But it was 15,000 feet high, and it was hot, 40 on the ground, 40 C on the ground. And at these 15,000 feet, it was also still, the temperature was much higher than the standard temperature. And so we were in terms of density altitude, probably at 18,000 or something like this. And as I was sitting in the back seat there, I had nothing else to do. I thought, and I had a nice computer, I should look up our true airspeed and see where we are. And I look it up, and we are at 277 kilometers an hour, 3 kilometers away from the 280 true airspeed. Holy smokes. And I was surprised how far this can diverge from the indicated. And normally it doesn't, because normally it isn't that hot, and so you don't have the density altitude problem. But in certain situations, like we fly in deserts in Nevada or so, it can be like this, and you have to be. This is where you really have to pay attention. Okay. So we have indicated the airspeed. We have now we understand true airspeed. What other airspeeds do we have? We have calibrated airspeed. We already touched on that once. Do you remember what that is? Calibrated airspeed is just like the compass in every airplane isn't quite right, has an error. The airspeed indicator and the placement of the pitot and so has an error, has a bit of an error as well. So when you look in the back of a manual of an airplane, there's usually a curve in there that says how your airspeed, your indicated airspeed, compares to the calibrated airspeed. And usually it's maybe a knot or 1.5 knots away from that, and then maybe at the extremes near stall speed or near VNE, it diverges more, maybe 10 knots or so. But in the normal range where you fly, it's really, really close. But that's the calibrated airspeed, and that gets measured by dragging basically on a line, which is a tube, a pressure tube, sort of a torpedo along a small probe, that flies in the airstream totally without anything around it. And that can pick up the calibrated airspeed, or the pressure, the pitot pressure for calibrated airspeed. And this is how they calibrate, make these calibration curves. And this could be, it's probably done for the type approval of every type. And then it's probably good for all the, don't think there are any differences or much of a difference between the individual airplanes of the same type, unless the locations of the pitot tubes or so changes. Then, of course, that requires a recalibration. Okay, so we have indicated airspeed, true airspeed, calibrated airspeed. And they show sometimes up in these questions. Okay, and then we had Bernoulli. Do we all ever heard of Bernoulli? Bernoulli says the faster the air goes, the lower the pressure. Somebody answered somebody said the faster the air goes, the higher the pressure, which is true for pitot pressure. But the Bernoulli pressure is basically the air goes by a wing or whatever, then the pressure there is the faster the air, the higher, the lower the pressure. That's basically what keeps airplanes flying. When the airflow goes over the wing, and the faster we go, the more negative pressure we have over the top of the wing. Okay, so when a question like this comes, as the velocity of air increases, its pressure decreases. Yep, that's the right answer. Then the number 2 would be, as the velocity of the air increases, the pressure increases. No. The velocity of the air has no effect on pressure. No, it does. The stalling angle will increase, the pressure increases. Nah, they just threw a couple of words into that sentence to confuse you. But so number 1 is definitely the right answer there. Okay, let's see what else we need to look at. Oh, yes, adverse yaw. Okay.
I hated this question.
Yeah, there was let me just see what was the question. That was question 30.
Well, I want to see the glider that allows you to apply one aileron at a time. Singular.
Yeah, so let's see what that question was, but it had to do with adverse yaw. Yeah. Okay, 35. Adverse aileron drag will cause an aircraft to enter a spiral dive? No. Yaw in the same direction as the applied aileron. Okay, let's see what else it has. Yaw to the left while the aircraft is banked to the right. And drop a wing in a steep turn. Well, can happen, but it's in the yawing here. So what happens is when you bank an airplane, you apply ailerons. One goes down, one goes up, and the wing where the aileron went down will go up. And also the wing where the aileron is down will have more drag. Now I need my airplane model. Okay, so we'll look at this airplane from behind. So this wing goes up, and because this wing has more drag, the aileron is pointing down on this wing. It also holds the airplane back like this. So the airplane actually turns to the right, but it's yawing to the left. And that's exactly what it does here. It's the yaws to the left while the airplane is banked to the right. Did I get my right and lefts wrong? I'm looking at it from the other side. So yeah, it's banked to the right and it's yawing to the left like this. That's what it does, what the aileron drag will do. and we call it adverse yaw. So basically, if you just, that's why we have a rudder, by the way. So if you just move the stick over to the side, what will happen is the wing will go up, but it will also hang back. And therefore, we don't just move the stick over to the right, we also move the rudder in the same direction. That will compensate for the yaw. That's the only reason why we use stick and rudder at the same time, to not let the yaw happen. And it's called also the secondary effect. Every control has a secondary effect. And the secondary effect of the ailerons is yawing. The secondary effect of the rudder, like if you just fly along and you kick in the rudder, it will first of all start yawing. That's the primary effect. But it will also start banking the airplane slowly. That's the secondary effect. And but the major secondary effect we are worried about is, of course, with the ailerons, and we compensate that with the rudder when we start a turn. So stick to the left, rudder to the left, stick to the right, rudder to the right. Unless we want to do a side slip, then it goes the other way. Okay, all clear? Or all confused? Okay, and then there was another juicy question. So this is called basically the adverse yaw. When this happens, because it's called adverse because you're yawing in the other direction than the turn is going. That's where the adverse comes from. Okay, and now we are looking at question 44. Okay, controlled airspace means airspace of defined dimensions within which. Okay. Any answers to that one? So we have the following options. Security regulations are in force. Air traffic control services provided. Only aircraft with a two-way radio may operate. And only flight with instrument flight rules is allowed.
So it's controlled airspace, so air traffic control services provided.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need a two-way radio because there's various levels of controlled airspace. Remember, maybe I have this here. No. So remember there's airspace classes. It starts with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah. So A, well, let's go backwards. G, uncontrolled airspace. So over SOSA, below 700 feet, we are in class G airspace. It's uncontrolled. That means even if you try to get ATC services, air traffic control services, you can't get them because first of all, they probably cannot hear you on the radio because you're so low. And secondly, they can't see you on the radar. Above 700 feet, we are getting into class E airspace. This is the lowest controlled airspace. And that airspace it's controlled, and you can have ATC services. For example, if you want to have an ATC, an IFR clearance or so, or if you want to fly IFR in controlled airspace, you can do this. But anybody else can also fly in this airspace. So VFR, you don't have to talk to anybody. Nowadays we have transponders so they can see us there, but in principle, you don't need a transponder, you don't need a radio, you can just fly there. This is over SOSA above 700 feet. Then the next up is class D airspace. And for example, the Hamilton control zone is a class D control zone, and Yeah, it's now the Hamilton control zone is Class D. And in Class D airspace, you need to have two-way communication with the air traffic control. So you need to speak to them. You don't need a clearance to enter it, but you have to be able to communicate with them. Now, for a control zone, things are a little different, and you shouldn't just fly into the control zone and talk to him. You should maybe ask if you are allowed to fly into the control zone. So, for example, Hamilton, if you want to fly through the control zone, and they are quite cooperative because they're bored. There's not much going on there. They're quite. They say, yeah, you can fly through the control zone, no problem, right? When we're coming back, sort of from Niagara Falls, the Hamilton is really in the way, right? And so we can fly through that control zone, no problem. We talk to him, and it's not a clearance. He's basically saying you're good to fly. Well, maybe he clears us, but we don't need a clearance. Where you now with the next airspace up is C, and C you need a clearance. So remember C and clearance. So you cannot fly into Class C airspace without a specific clearance where the controller says you're cleared into Class C airspace. What is Class C airspace? The Kitchener control zone is Class C airspace. And the big inverted wedding cake over Toronto, that's what we refer to as the Toronto Class C, is also Class C airspace. And with a transponder, without a transponder, they will not clear you into a Class C airspace unless you declare an emergency. Then you can do anything, but you have to explain later. So, example, you have no transponder and you need to land in Kitchener because you're running out of fuel, or somebody had a heart attack or whatever, right? And you just declare an emergency and you fly into Class C airspace. That's fine, but without that, you cannot fly into Class C airspace without being cleared into it. And with gliders, with transponders, they sometimes do that. I think when we had one glider with one transponder a few years ago, they found this cute to have a glider in the Toronto control zone. But nowadays, with every glider having a transponder, they probably don't find it so cute anymore. And they will probably expect that they tell you to stay clear of Class C airspace, because all the air traffic control or collision avoidance is based on not laterally, it's based on different levels. So, and for this to work, you have to be able to maintain a certain level. If he says, okay, you're cleared to 4,000 feet, you better stay at 4,000 feet, and gliders cannot do this. Gliders will always go downhill and then they need to gas up again and go up. So that's why gliders are difficult to handle from the air traffic control perspective. So that's Class C. And the next one up is Class B. That's sort of above 10,000 feet, or 12,005, I think, where you definitely need, I'm not sure if you can still fly VFR there, perhaps if you have transponders, but it is actually IFR type airspace. And in Class A is only IFR. There's nothing else. There's no VFR flight. So that's the different classifications and also how they rank. So from the least control is at the bottom at Class G, and then Class F is actually a special airspace set aside for special things. It can be military, can be a prohibited area. We'll talk about this a little later when we look at the maps. And but it could also be an area, sort of an advisory area, where there's parachuting and there's sort of a Class F airspace around that says, when you fly through there, watch out, there may be meat bombs coming down. And gliding clubs can also, some of them in Ottawa, they have Class F airspaces. So that basically keeps all the other traffic pretty much out. But it's an advisory area, so it's not mandatory that they're out. But it's recommended that they certainly don't fly through that airspace unless there's a really good reason, like they want to land at the airport. IFR traffic is usually being routed around Class F airspace. So that's Class F. We'll talk about this later and how it shows up on a map. Yes, Reg.
There is some sort of skydive thing in Flamborough. Do they have a Class F?
No, Flamborough is that's sort of between Hamilton and Toronto, right?
Like when I drive, I come north on Highway 6 and then I turn onto Highway 5 or 8 or something.
Yeah.
And then come across and then go up Peter's Corners. But on the way over near Morden's, there's like a golf course and there's a exotic butcher and there's a skydiving place.
Okay, yeah, I know. No, they don't have a Class F airspace because this is very busy airspace for IFR approaches into Toronto. And Class F airspace, as I said, they won't route IFR traffic through Class F airspace. It would really be in the way. So the way they are handling it, basically the jump plane pilot keeps talking to ATC as he goes up and reports his height. And then he reports, okay, the jumpers I will release them in a minute or so. So then they know the tower controllers in Toronto or the air traffic controllers in Toronto know, okay, now we got to keep our traffic out of there. And then when this is done, after a while, he says, okay, I'm on my way down now. He gives the heights, and then they know they can fly there again. And the same with, there's also a skydive southeast of Hamilton. They're really busy, these guys, and they have a zone, but it is I don't think it's Class F. It's just sort of an alert zone that's around that airport. But as gliders, we definitely want to be very careful when we get to these drop zones, and we want to be in contact basically with the jump plane or with somebody on the ground who can tell us what the status is. Are they flying today? Are they jumping? Are they not jumping? And if the jump plane is in the air climbing, right? You better stay out of that zone, right? Definitely. And the other thing is, of course, the jump plane will usually drop the skydivers just upwind of the airport. So downwind is probably safer because they will hang sort of on the upwind side. But anyways, it is some of these zones have Class F airspace. Then there's places that have rocket launches. There's near Arthur, there's a rocket place. I don't think they launch any rockets anymore, but the airspace is still there. I've never seen a rocket there. Okay. So this is all about controlled airspace. So Class F is not controlled airspace, right? It's a special use airspace. But everything else, G is uncontrolled, F is special, and then from E up, it's all controlled airspace. And the E is the lowest controlled airspace where you can have service. So this is number 2 here. And but there's no other restriction. Yeah, there are other restrictions. The minima for VFR visibility for VFR flight, the VFR minima are different in controlled airspace. Do we know what the minimum visibility requirement is? This is something we need to know.
3 miles.
3 miles. Do we know what kind of miles? Statute miles, yeah. Land miles. This is totally crazy, right? They also, when you listen to the weather in Kitchener, they give the visibility also in statute miles, right? Not in nautical miles or anything. So in the weather, the visibility is usually given in statute miles. Yeah, we're back to a nice mix of whatever's, right? So 3 miles is the minimum visibility. Now for us gliders, it's not really usually an issue because we don't fly in weather where there's only 3 miles, but this is an issue, or there's around 3 miles visibility, except last year, like in 2023, we had a few days, we had all this smoke. Remember this? And the sun was shining, but with all that smoke, it really dragged the visibility down. And we had a day, we checked Hamilton, the Met Tower there, and they were reporting a little less than 3 miles visibility. We checked Waterloo, they were reporting 3 miles. So we were being in between. We decided, I remember this with Dave and I, we decided, no, we can't really. I mean, it was a nice and sunny day. We cannot fly. We don't have minimum visibility, even though the sun was shining, right? But that's the only case I remember where this became a problem for gliding, the visibility. But we need to know this for the exam. Now, what we really need to know is some other criteria in controlled airspace, and this is a distance from the clouds, minimum distances from the clouds, and they are vertically. We know what the minimum distance to clouds vertically is. Yeah,
500 feet.
500 feet. Yeah, so we should not, particularly in a busy airspace like in where we fly, we should not get closer than 500 feet to the clouds. The reason is you could all of a sudden see some landing gear coming out of the clouds, right, of an airliner that's going into Hamilton, and you didn't see him because he was in the cloud, right? And so this is the vertical, and there's also a horizontal minimum distance. Do we know what that is? Where we shouldn't get closer.
It's 1 mile, isn't it?
It's 1 mile. One again. I think it's a statute mile, and
It is a statute mile.
we need to stay away 1 mile laterally from the clouds. So when we go, sometimes we have situations where there's sort of a lot of clouds around, and we have to go climb through the blue holes. We got to make sure the holes are big enough so we have in every direction at least 1 mile to the cloud. Otherwise, we are not legal. And again, this is if a plane is flying, let's say a jet flying in their cloud, when he pops out, he's only 1 mile away and is pointing at you. You don't have much time, right? And he doesn't have much time either to avoid you, right? This is already pretty close. Okay, so remember, 3 miles visibility minimum, 500 feet vertically to the clouds, and 1 mile horizontally to the clouds. And this is all early on. I gave you a document about Canada's airspace. So if you pull that up and look at it, it first of all explains all the different airspaces, how they are, why they are, and how they are arranged. And then if you read down, this is a 6-page document, it gives you the minimum visibilities, the minimums in control zones, the minimums in uncontrolled airspace. There's also minimums, but they're smaller. And just read up on those. That's where it is. I don't have it. I don't have it open right now, this file, so I don't want to spend time looking at it. Okay, and that was the evil question number 44, and I think that it's 9 o'clock as well. That brings it to an end. So
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. So the next time we will go through some weather reports. Thank you. So maybe review. I gave you the decoding sheet for all the weather reports. Remember, they're sort of in funny code. The reason why they are in funny code is because back in the old days when I was young, the way there was no internet and all these things. The way they were transmitted was with teletype. It was going click, 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 right? And you couldn't transmit all that much, so that's why they abbreviated all these words, and that's why this code is basically abbreviations, right? That's all that is. And And it really, after a while, you can read this. I mean, I rather read the weather report in that form than a weather report in full warm and flowery language, right? At least I know what's going on. So, there will be questions. There will be, in a typical exam question is it gives you a line, like a METAR line, and it says, so what's the wind? What's the visibility? What's the air pressure? Altimeter setting and that kind of stuff. You have to basically fit this, fiddle this out. Okay. So we'll have one more session in December, next week, Thursday. And then there will be homework for Christmas, so don't get too bored. And you can work on this while you're in between Turkey. And then we'll meet again after that in January. And then there's the new login code. And I'm learning on, just as you do, with this Google stuff, I'm learning myself. So I'm turning off the screen recorder now. Okay, so we stop that. So we have a recording, at least I think so. So just to the recordings, the first recording I made, which was lesson number 3, I made like this with the main screen where we could see the faces and what was projected to the screen. The second recording I did was just of my presentation screen. So you see what's there much bigger and you hear my voice, but what you're missing is this. And so look at this and see what you like better. This one I recorded the main screen again. So yep. Okay. Have a good night. It was good talking to you. And
Thank you. Have a good night.
yeah, it must be the middle of the night where you are, Noah.
It's 2 now, so
Okay.
definitely bedtime.
Okay. Well, hopefully it didn't take away too much of your sleep.
No.
Okay. All the best. You're in UTC.